Did you know that even experienced PC users make some very obvious mistakes when upgrading? Mistakes that can turn a perfectly fine PC into an underperforming one while making them spend way more money than they should. And that could be you. But luckily, you clicked on this video, because by the end of it, you'll know exactly what to upgrade, what not to touch, and how to avoid every mistake that makes people waste money on their PCs. So, when wanting to upgrade your PC, the first and most important thing to do before anything is to stop and think, what do I want? Do I want more speed? Or do I want more FPS? Or maybe something specific like less temperature rise, more internal space, or graphics quality. In any case, once you get that specific idea of what needs improvement in your setup, it's time to identify what's holding your PC back in that department. Say you need more FPS. Then changing something like RAM or SSDs won't do much, and sometimes even changing the CPU or GPU won't give you satisfying results, depending on some specific factors. This takes us to how to identify a CPU and GPU imbalance, or more specifically, a bottleneck. Grab a monitoring tool like MSI Afterburner and check for higher thread usage in a game, especially in CPU-demanding scenarios, like in a city with loads of people. If the GPU is waiting for a response from the CPU, and the CPU isn't able to give that as fast, that's what's called a bottleneck. Of course, the lower the resolution, the less work there is for the GPU, and then the CPU becomes the limiting factor. If there is one or a few threads at close to or about 100%, and your GPU is below 70 to 80% while delivering less FPS than it should, that's a CPU bottleneck. Now, before getting into what to upgrade to, let's get into two different but very usual scenarios here. The first is actually the opposite of the CPU bottlenecked one. Your CPU is chilling while your GPU is at 99% and delivering mediocre FPS. Then, of course, a GPU upgrade will deliver much more satisfying results. And then there's the usual. There's no imbalance or bottlenecks in my PC, but I want to get more FPS anyway. Here is when most people commit the classic mistake of blindly buying a GPU and turning a fine computer into a CPU bottlenecked one, because the older CPU won't push the GPU properly. So you've decided to upgrade your CPU, but there are a couple of things to consider before choosing one. First is, will I use Ryzen or Intel? Honestly, as of today, if you're thinking of upgrading in the future, go with AMD. They usually have better long-term value, and you won't need to change sockets for a while, if you go Zen 5, for example. While Intel does still have awesome performance for multitasking and rendering, AMD is still the best cost-to-performance choice for gamers right now. Second is, will I need to upgrade the motherboard as well, or not? To know that, check the supported socket of the CPU you're about to upgrade to, then see if your motherboard has that socket. If it does, fine, you're safe. If it doesn't, here's a couple of quick tips to get a new motherboard. First of all, don't overspend. It's best to save some money here and leave some left for the GPU or CPU. Also, get a B chipset, which is usually enough for 99% of users, but of course, avoid super cheap models if you plan to get a power-hungry CPU. Check the CPU support list. Check the size as well to see if it'll fit your case or not, and check the number of M2 slots and consider how many you'll need. Also see the RGB connectors, which people usually overlook, only to regret it later. And be sure it actually has the USB ports you need. The more the better. Trust me, you'll regret it later if you don't consider this. And of course, I couldn't forget this. Get a DDR5 board. Now that we've got motherboards covered, let's get back to the CPUs. Here, the most important thing to do is to look ahead. Say you buy a Ryzen 5600 CPU because of its budget price, which is now about $150. And of course, you get a GPU that matches its performance. But in the future, when you finally want to upgrade, you'll notice you're stuck with the Zen 3 architecture and the AM4 socket. And then, just because of that minor mistake, you'll need to upgrade the whole machine just to get more FPS. But if, on the other hand, you saved a bit more and bought a newer CPU, like the AMD Ryzen 59600X, you'll be good for at least 2 years ahead, given how AMD is planning to release Zen 6 next year. The same analogy can be used for Intel CPUs, like the Intel Core i5-12400F versus the Intel Core Ultra 5245K. Anyway, most of these newer CPUs don't come with bundled coolers anymore, and to make it worse, some of them are breaking temperature boundaries easily. For cooling, check the temperature of the CPU under a demanding task, and check how high the temp needs to be before it starts throttling. You'll usually find this on the CPU website. Then, ask yourself if you really need the improvement or if it'll just be a waste of money that could have been spent elsewhere. Of course, an AIO isn't always needed, and there are plenty of good air coolers out there, but there's no denying that a good-looking AIO can greatly enhance the looks of any setup. So, if you have the money, don't be afraid to get one. Just be sure to actually get one that fits inside your case, and check some videos of tests with it to know if it's really good for the CPU of your choice. The same should be done for air coolers, of course. As for GPUs, the choice is pretty much dependent on your budget. If you can go ahead and get the fastest out there, just be sure not to pair it with a 5600, for example, since it'll become CPU limited. But if you do have a more limited budget, things can get a bit tricky. Just like processors, there's once again a choice to be made here between AMD and Nvidia. Usually, Nvidia GPUs shine with their features like ray tracing and DLSS4 and are great for streamers, while AMD usually has the best cost per frame cards. At this point in time, there's no denying that the newest DLSS 4.5 looks better than FSR 4, but AMD seems to be closing the gap. Let's see how things unfold in the near future. But right now, if you see two GPUs at basically the same performance and roughly the same prices, it's usually the best choice to go with the green side. But I'm curious about the general consensus today. Would you rather pick better ray tracing and features with Nvidia, or more raw cost per frame with AMD? Let me know below. Of course, I won't get too deep into hardware recommendations here since this video is not about the best upgrades list, but I'll leave links to the products I mention here in the description so you can check their prices in your region. Also, you can ask me in the comments for any specific question about PC parts. Try to steer clear of 8GB cards. Current games are demanding much more than that. Once again, be sure that the GPU of your choice is a good match for your CPU. A couple of YouTube searches and you'll find your specs, and if everything is evened out or a bit unbalanced. Another super important step here is to actually check if your power supply will handle the new GPU. Some GPUs, especially the more powerful ones, draw a lot of energy and need a higher wattage to operate fully. Now, you don't need to calculate the full consumption of every PC part for this. Just grab the CPU plus GPU TDP/TGP, add about 300 watts of headroom, and that's the PSU you should buy. As a rule of thumb, look for anything equal to or above 80+ gold, and from a reputable brand, so that it doesn't explode on you, literally. Also, avoid those ugly Molex connectors. They're going to make your build look like a 2005 one. Either that or hide them with some sleeved cables instead. Lastly, for a case upgrade, get a cool-looking one. Just make sure it has good airflow. You probably don't want to fry your components inside a glass furnace, so make sure to install some fans in it too, and check if the intake and exhaust balance is there. Now, for those who are searching for more speed instead of FPS, let's get into a few possible upgrades in 2026. With the recent RAM incident, it's a bit hard to recommend upgrading your RAM memory in 2026. So it's, at least for now, better to just stick to the ones you have and optimize them. The good news is that RAM upgrades don't really give much overall speed to your PC, especially compared to a fast NVMe, for example. Instead, you could try upgrading to a faster/better NVMe, turning on XMP so that you are actually using the memory speed you paid for, removing some unnecessary apps from startup, and avoiding opening a lot of apps at the same time. And avoid using Chrome specifically as the main browser since it's known for being super heavy on RAM. But in the end, a processor upgrade and an NVMe upgrade will do much more to your PC speed than the RAM, so focus on those, at least for now. For a good NVMe, usually you'll look for a big one, like 2 or 4 terabytes, and it doesn't need to be PCIe 5.0. A 4.0 is still the sweet spot here, and you don't need to spend the extra. Look up your board's manual and confirm the M2 slot runs at X4. That's where you get full NVMe speed. And of course, as some of these slots share lanes with the GPU, you'll optimally want to use just one big NVMe instead of a couple of them. And lastly, look for the faster random read speed that fits your budget instead of the sequential one, since the former is the one that actually affects game loading speed. Now, let's say your upgrade idea is to just make things look better. So in that case, you should check this video guide on monitors and this Best Monitors of 2026 list. Thank you all for watching this video. Ask me in the comments for any specific upgrades, drop a like, and I'll see you in the next one.